part of the question was the nature of the experiment, which is this concept of post-dialectical. Did you want to,
Yeah.
like, where is your question situated in that?
Yeah. Well, when did that term really come online for you? I mean, what was it in your past? Like, was it a professional experience? Was it a personal experience? Was it a combination of the two? What really got you started on this and got you passionate and excited about the idea of post-dialectical?
Do you want the long version or the short version?
Let's do the short version first, maybe.
How far back do you have to go?
Yeah.
Well, I'll let's see. I'll give you the medium version.
Okay.
The medium version, I'll situate it in with respect to Ken Wilber's work, and that is when I was reading Spectrum of Consciousness and No Boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I really thought that he was mapping out the territories of, the quadrants, so that he could explain really that they were fluid and that you could cross them, and that at one point he uses the expression, it's the map of the prison.
Mm-hmm.
Since that period, I think Aqua has been used more as a methodology and a tool, and in some sense has been reified in that process. So my work then branched off from Wilber's, and I was very curious in terms of some experiences I had and some readings I was doing, primarily of early pre-Buddhist Tibetan Bon scholastics, who seemed to have a worldview or a vision that was not fragmented into these categories as Wilber and in fact Nagarjuna describes them.
Mm-hmm.
So there were people also in the Western philosophical canon like Heidegger that were trying to nuance this territory. And a Heidegger scholar called Polly Pilko, who talks about the aconceptual, atheoretical subjective content prior to the subject actually being a subject, so he called them pre-subjective centers. So I was beginning to really hunger for people who were working in this territory that not only could identify all the categories that, the one in many, the interior, the exterior, the transcendent, and the immanent, not only could see all those categories, but could also intuit or get a feel for moving beyond them.
Mm-hmm.
So at the first ITC conference in 2008, I presented a process model of integral theory, because following the process thinkers, they do have a strategy to work with the categories in ways that get beyond these boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
In Gebser's work, the key fulcrum for Gebser in getting beyond these categories is to contextualize them in terms of the achronon, which is a timeless and spaceless dimension. I combined the Gebser's work with the process thinkers. And by the time ITC 2010 came along, I had hypothesized a type of reasoning that fit with Gebser's expectation of the kind of reasoning that would come with the new consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I saw that as clearly post-dialectical.
Right.
And I used Basish's table of dialectical, late-stage dialectical, and I said beyond that is even a major shift, and that is post-dialectical. And in that paper, I called the type of reasoning ontological as opposed to epistemological. So instead of the logic of knowing, epistemic knowing, it was a logic of being.
Gotcha.
So that the foundation of the logics that we use, and then by extension the language, would no longer reflect this cartography of knowledge that the mental structure has, which is fragmented into these polar opposites, fragmented and fractally in many different ways.
Yeah.
But the logic of our reasoning and the logic of our language would be directly related with our deeper intuitions of wholeness in our being. And so the hypothesis was that this ontologics was not only a possibility, but that I could identify some of this intuition and some of this trajectory in the work of some recent writers.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I got to the Magellan course and established the Magellan course, I was feeling that overstating the existence of something called ontologics was creating pushback.
Yeah.
Why was it creating pushback? Because people tend to converse with a dialectical mind. So
Right.
if you have ontologics, you must have, you know, non-ontologics or
Non-ontologics.
something. It was setting up exactly the discursive type of experience that it was trying to point beyond.
Right.
So instead of using the term ontologics, which is a much more mature term, I started using the language of hypothesizing post-dialectical. What would it be like if there were a post-dialectical way of being? What it would be like if our language represented our intuition of being that is not fragmented. So
Yeah.
I started laying out the inquiry in terms of a hypothesis beyond that which we are already familiar with, without naming it, because the naming of it became problematic. I have a saying I like to use, and that is, when the injunction creates an object for the discursive mind, the medicine becomes poison. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so even though I am still writing about ontologics and its relationship to the history of thinking and the history of philosophy, both East and West, in the Magellan courses we've used it as an active inquiry, and it has, I think, been much more successful in facilitating its emergence in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least it's been a lot more fun than just debating whether such
Yeah.
a creature as the Loch Ness Monster exists.
Yes, yeah, that's been my experience. I mean, I've really noticed that, and for myself, the sense of connecting with other people, with relating to them, is not just about an argument or trying to get a point of view across or trying to even understand a point of view. It really comes down to just being with that person and experiencing being with them.